We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to Zencaster.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled. Hope y'all enjoyed our week off, because we enjoyed our week off. I can tell you that right now. Thanks so much for coming back to join us. If you are a returning listener, and if you're just finding us for the first time, well, thanks for coming. We are Sisters Assembled. We talk all things MCU, and in this case, MCU adjacent, because today we are going to be talking about Kraven the Hunter predictions, which we don't know a lot, so it's going to be a fun one. But without further ado, I'm going to let Katie kick us off for this, because I know that despite Sony's sketchy track record with MCU adjacent films, she's mildly excited for this one because, you know, they picked a pretty solid star. So, Katie, kick it off.
I would have to argue we know quite a bit about this movie. If one is to kind of go on the other side of that, I feel like, and I'm going to say this because personally I don't find Sony shocking me often, I feel like I know relatively the entire plot of the movie. The trailers have shown quite a bit, and so I feel like for the most part, I could see where you're going to tell the story. I could see how we're going to go. I could see who the main antagonist is and the relationship he has with them because it's his father. I feel like, or, you know, I mean, maybe I'm making some assumptions, but I feel like I know a lot about what's going to be on the big screen.
That's interesting because what I've been reading has said that the foreigner is actually going to be the prime antagonist of the film. I think his dad is going to be playing some mind games for sure, and he will be a antagonist or one of them. But the one that he's actually fighting, those guys that he's physically fighting in the film, probably, in my opinion, work for the foreigner. So that, you know, there's definitely some room for interpretation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I think where I'm coming from with not really knowing is, like, I feel like they're showing the same, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 clips over and over again. And I guess what I'm hoping is what they're showing us in the plot isn't all of it, right? Because I think it would be a little disappointing to go in and be like, all right, that's exactly what I expected from this film. I will say one thing that made me really excited. I was watching a featurette as I was prepping, you know, to record this episode, and I believe it was Aaron Taylor Johnson himself talking about how this is a villain origin story. So, you know, it is interesting because we've talked a lot about how Sony has chosen to take so much of Spider-Man's rogues gallery and essentially make them anti-heroes. And you see that in this film, at certain parts, he is fighting for the side of right? Like, he is protecting animals, or we don't know exactly what his conflict will be with the foreigner, but it does seem like he might be a little bit in the right. So it seems like they're kind of playing into that, but I love the idea that overarchingly, he's going to end up being still a villain. There are rumors going around that Aaron Taylor Johnson is contracted for multiple films and that he will be back. I don't know how that I don't know how that happens, because Sony doesn't, you know, lay out any actual overarching plans whatsoever, nor do they have any clear direction that they've set up with this Sony Spider-Man universe. But if that's the case, I might not hate that this is the one character that they're choosing to do a longer arc with, obviously outside of Venom, because that was an actual franchise that relatively worked.
Yeah, let me just clarify by saying I think mentally and like from an emotional standpoint, his father's going to be playing a huge antagonistic point of view for him.
For sure.
And it's going to play into the entire story. Well, I'm not saying he's like the antagonist per se. And to your point, there seems to be another one in play. His father is clearly what's going to be driving a lot of the story. We see that even in the trailers, you see how he has this relationship with his father, even at a young age, that's not healthy. You see they lose their mother. He has a brother who you see appears. There's a lot of levels to it of what we've actually been shown. And so I do think it'll be interesting to see that dynamic play out because, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really feel like we get to see that familial kind of aspect of, and Marvel put aside, I'm talking more Sony, we don't really get to see that aspect as prominently sometimes in some of the other pieces of work, especially in a negative front. And so I'll be interested to see how that kind of builds his story from the ground up because that seems to be how he gets where he gets. That kind of seems to be his initial driving force is everything that goes down with his father and the relationship he has with him. As to what you were saying about kind of being a longer term villain, is that not what they should have been doing the whole time?
I
Like I
agree.
shouldn't sit here and kind of laugh about it, but like I'm fine if you want to do villain origin stories, but then make them villains.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you've made them all anti-heroes to some degree. You made Morbius an anti-hero, then somehow tried to make him a villain at the end and be like, Spider-Man. Like, I don't really understand how you can do that because you can't make me sit here and like them and have them fighting for the good side. And then they're like, never mind though. We still hate Spider-Man. Craven, I think, is interesting because origin wise as well, like the reason he doesn't like Spider-Man is solely because he wants to hunt him. Like that's if you boil down their stories together, he's a hunter and he's the best hunter that exists. And so he wants to hunt the biggest prey. And at the time, it's Spider-Man at that point. So it's kind of interesting to like see where that could translate because he could still be what we consider a relatively good guy by taking out these like really menacing dudes, but also be like, but that guy over there, I don't like you because you're a big prey and I want to take you down. Like if he's motivated solely by prey and wanting to take down the big cheese, if you will, because that's what he wants, then I could see and understand kind of being able to translate that more into a Spider Man villain than where they left a lot of these other characters.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he has a more clear path in the way that he could go from, a guy who, methods aside, because it's rated R. Let's put that out there too. Like, it's going to be gory. It's going to be at the level of a Deadpool without a lot of the humor, it seems like. But I think how you go from a guy who, despite his methods, is fighting on the side of right to a guy who could be a Spider Man villain, you're right. It is about the prey. And one of the other things I thought was interesting about kind of that relationship between Craven and Spider-Man is Sergei's mother. So his name is Sergei Kravinoff, right? That's his actual given name. His mother goes to an insane asylum, his birth mother, and in it it's actually spider infested. So he like has a lot of trauma already around spiders. And then to your point, he wants to be, the best hunter. A lot of that I think is spurned on by his father, as we see in kind of that mental manipulation and abuse that he receives from him. So there's a lot of layers to it. One other thing I thought was super interesting is they were calling it a standalone film. That's what Aaron Taylor Johnson, said in that same featurette, which I think is a little weird and a little contradictory against, some of the reports that he's kind of signed on for multiple films. So I did just want to point that out there because we are talking, could it be a longer term story arc? I don't know because now he's saying it's a standalone. So I think there's just a lot of mixed messages coming out from Sony in terms of what could this actually open up. Kraven is one of Spider-Man's original villains. He's a member of the Sinister Six. He has some really crazy and some of the most meaningful storylines, I think. There are people who are major Spider-Man comic fans who talk about Kraven's death as one of these like crazy like turning point moments within the comics, and it's like a huge deal. So I just want to point that out as well, that he is like such a big character. I mean, that's someone, when they said Kraven the Hunter, that's someone we knew, from even the cartoons that you watch as a kid. He has made it through so much of the Spider-Man, medium, whatever he's in. It's actually kind of surprising it took till 2024 to see him come into live action or, in any way.
Yeah, I actually will kind of echo that sentiment. I'm shocked it's taken this long, especially because he's not really like a crazy dude if you think about it. Electro has a lot that's got to happen to get him there. Green Goblin, there's a lot of layers there. So like they're iconic in their own way, but like there's a lot of story you got to tell to kind of establish them as a villain. Well, on the flip side, I feel like Craven, I mean, in the comics, he actually gets his abilities more by I would compare it actually to like a Black Panther kind of the herb. It's very similar. Clearly they're going another direction. I kind of like what seems to be the direction they're going in this movie where he's kind of like apparently after getting attacked by the lion, it looks like some of the lion's blood goes into his blood, and I'd assume that kind of just does the whole hey, I'm kind of part whatever. I kind of like that direction more than just he drinks like a little magical elixir now and again, and that's how he gets superhuman strength and speed and all this stuff.
Yeah,
I
same.
do like that little alteration. I think it makes more sense actually for the character. I also think when you're going to tell a story about a hunter who is what looks to be very sympathetic towards animals as well. Like it seems, and don't get me wrong, he's to my memory like this a lot in Origin as well. But he's very sympathetic to animals. So I sit there and I'm like, well, if that's the story you're going to tell, I think it makes sense for him to be pretty animalistic and to take on a lot of those traits more than just taking essentially a potion or elixir or whatever you want to call it. So I do like that. I think it's going to be interesting. I like the change, but otherwise, like, I guess it's kind of one of those where you don't really know where he's going to go as a character. If he's going to be a villain and this is going to be the villain origin, it's going to be an interesting way to show why we can't love him.
Yeah, I would agree because I think the other, fly in the ointment, if you will, that we haven't yet talked about that kind of plays into this because I don't really understand how we move on from this is the Rhino is in this film
Yeah.
and looks like he may be an antagonist as well. So if he's fighting one of Spider-Man's villains, clearly that would put him most likely on the side of right considering he's the protagonist of this film. So I have two questions coming out of that. One, to your point, how do we then transfer him into a villain? I know, maybe it is his first introduction to Spider-Man and immediately that obsession, clicks into place and now he's like ready to go and that sets that up. Now you have to basically make him either Spider-Man 4 or Spider-Man 5 if you don't want to, make that a, dangling end credit scene, which you all know how we feel about those. So that's one option. But then the other thing is going back to Rhino is like, well, does this mean that Rhino is now going to be defeated and never going to actually meet Spider Man? Because we all know we got that teaser at the end of The Amazing Spider Man 2. So we've never actually seen a Spider Man fight a Rhino for real, more than like 2 seconds of him laughing in a gross mechanical suit.
I don't think they're going to waste him. And every time I do a predictions, guys, I sit here and I give them the benefit of the doubt.
That's bold.
And I really need to stop, but I'm gonna say it. If this is a villain origin, there has to still be a shift. There still has to be the way for us to sit there and say, okay, he is not a good guy at the end of the day. I'm sure they're gonna fight because we've seen it. We've seen it in the trailer. But I don't think it's gonna be a defeating fight. I don't think it's gonna be the end. I think it's gonna open the door so that they don't need to do a single Rhino movie. That is what I'm going to throw out there and think that that's the possibility is by bringing him into this movie, you don't need to make the excuse to have to make a standalone Rhino origin story and all that crap. You're going to do it in this movie. You're going to have the two go after each other. Because let's be real, we've seen this happen before. Two villains go after each other and then suddenly a common denominator, aka Spider-Man, would come along and then boom, they're not necessarily friends, but they have a common foe and they're going to fight the common foe.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I think would work out really well here is we could get a really cool Kraven and Rhino fight and then whatever needs to happen in the meantime to fix that or at least kind of glaze over it, put a band-aid on it for the time being and let those two exist together to eventually make them be a Spider-Man villain. I think that's what you could do. Again, I think it helps to avoid hey, let's make a massive Rhino movie when personally, I mean, I guess I didn't feel this way about Morbius either, but personally, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't mind Venom and I didn't mind that they made that a franchise. And also that apparently to me is sticking out like a sore thumb regarding the whole like possibility of a Sinister Six. I don't mind this movie being made. I don't. And it's not just because of Aaron Taylor Johnson, but you do have a good actor who's going into this role. But at the end of the day, I like Kraven as a character. We haven't gotten to see him before, so I think it would be very interesting. I'm not mad this movie's being made. I'm mad if it's being made aimlessly. but I'm not mad it's being made. You make a Rhino movie, I gotta be honest, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't really know Rhino like that. I know him as Rhino. I don't know much about him. I just know him as a Spider-Man villain. So I do think this is a really good way to just have it happen. If they waste him, I think, and I probably have said this before too, but I really think that once again goes to show Sony has no ability to tell a real cohesive story.
Yeah.
They have no ability to use their movies as a bigger thing to tell a bigger story, and it's a waste of everybody's time. That is just a fact. If they waste Rhino in the Kraven the Hunter movie.
I totally agree, because I think this is a good point to kind of lay out the villains that we have still on the board in both the Sony Spider-Man universe and the MCU, because they've left some on the table there as well. We have the Shocker still on the board from the MCU. We have the Scorpion from the original Homecoming as well. Neither one of those have made a second appearance or have been even hinted that they're going to come back in any way, which is a loss on both fronts for me. You now have Morbius, who has randomly connected with Vulture, which does not make any sense in relation to universes at all. You have Venom, which we've talked about that, so we're going to leave that separately. You have all the ladies from Madam Web, which they're not villains, but they are Spider-Man adjacent characters, and they are just out there nebulously. You now have Kraven, you now have Rhino. Mysterio supposedly still alive. That's a rumor as well. So, like, what is going on here? Because you have a ton of his most iconic villains on the board.
But I think you kind of pointed out without pointing it out. Take out a few because you listed a couple of people like Madam Web and that group and whatever. And Venom, I'm going to take out because, again, they didn't set up Venom right now, the Venom we know, to be a villain.
Yeah.
They closed that story. If you guys kind of want to hear more about what we think could happen next, we did do a whole episode a few episodes ago about like what's next for Venom in general and like possibly the storyline. So go check that out if you want to explore that. Regardless, as far as Sony has it right now, they've closed that door. So take him out, take out Madam Web. Is that not roughly 6 or 7 that you're listing?
Yeah.
So we are at cap if we're trying to do a Sinister Six. And we've already discussed, we're not doing Electro again. We're not doing the Green Goblin. We could do Hobgoblin,
Yeah.
but we're not going to do the Green Goblin again. We're not going to do Sandman again. They've been done, and then No Way Home happened. And I know some people also argued No Way Home could be Sinister Six adjacent kind of vibe.
I mean, you had half.
Yeah, but at the same time, you also brought in all the other Spider-Men. So, like, it was a lot more of a swan song, I think, to all of the Spider-Men and the stories that have been told so far.
For sure.
So, I don't even think I'd consider that a Sinister Six, truly. I really don't. So, that being said, I mean, we are at like 6 or 7 after this movie. So, I would not be shocked, and not to skip ahead because I know we do these at the end, but if a mid or end credit scene is connecting more of them together, you have theoretically 2 of them in this movie. You have 2 hanging out in some random universe because I don't know how Vulture got there, but he got there. And you have 2 in the MCU universe. So at the end of the day, I don't know really. I mean, we're not getting into this. I don't know the rules of the multiverse. I don't know how it works. I don't know where we're going. I don't understand it all. But at the end of the day, you have 2 or groups of 2 in 3 different places. You just got to start connecting them. Did the Vulture connection to Morbius make sense? No, but they did it.
Yeah.
So at this point, it doesn't need to make sense. They just need to bring them together. And so I wouldn't be shocked to see if that's something that starts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally true. I think that, to me, is the only thing that could redeem Sony's hodgepodge way of doing this, because this is something, I mean, go back to any of our coverage relating to the Sony Spider-Man universe. All we've been asking is for something tangible and sensical that actually makes this feel like a cohesive universe, a la what we're used to in the MCU. I would hazard to say even DC has done better at making a more cohesive universe. I'm talking the, original DCEU or whatever it is, not what James Gunn is going to do, because I think that's going to be great. But the one that we had with Zack Snyder and all that stuff. But anyway, what I'm saying is we've been asking for this for a while. And the only thing that they've can do now because they've painted themselves into a corner because they refuse to bring Tom Holland in, which I get it, whatever, is the Sinister Six. It's the only thing that at this point could redeem why they have done any of this, and it could bring them all together. Like I mentioned, we have a Mysterio still. I mean, people have been saying he's still alive for, years, ever since Far From Home. Notice I've been getting all of these right. Go me. But anyway, ever since Far From Home, people have been saying he's still around. If we do a real Mysterio, right, then we can maybe start to work around some of this multiversal stuff, right? And so that's just one way to do it. Obviously, our catch all is Secret Wars. That's another thought. But the thesis here is this is your last one, theoretically. It's the last one we've heard about, at least. I don't even know there are any others in production. This is your last one. Make it count. Make all of these worth it by bringing them together. And then I don't care if that's Spider Man 4. That's fine. That works. It makes sense.
Yeah, I think Kraven has a very interesting way it could go in a very positive way. Regardless, though, looking at the movie as a whole, I think we talked about this at the very beginning. I'm not sure what to explicitly speak about. I'm not sure what to explicitly expect because I think I kind of have the gist. I feel like I could get through the movie and be like, yeah, I understood for the most part where this was going to go. But I am going to be really intrigued. And I know we did talk about this, but I do want to go a little bit more in detail about how he becomes a full villain. Because as we're talking about all of this, we keep saying, we see how his dad is. I mean, he makes a comment in one of the trailers where he's talking about, my dad puts these bad people in the world and it's my job to take them out or something like that. So again, very motivated by his relationship or lack thereof relationship with his father as an adult. But I guess I'm intrigued to understand where that shift takes place. And maybe that is something more comic origin, like where he sees Spider-Man and doesn't think he's a good guy. I mean, that's not explicitly the comic part, but like the idea of like going after the bigger prey, maybe he's kind of like, you don't appear to be a good guy to me. On the flip side of that, I could actually really see them maybe, and as I say this, I already know I'm backing us into Spider-Man 3, Tobey Maguire, too many villains at once. And as I say this, I know I'm backing myself into that corner. But I wonder if it could be pretty interesting to try and do the Venom suit with a Sinister Six, because I could see Kraven in his way justifying like, you're not a good guy. You're just as bad as these other guys I take out. So I could see that being an interesting aspect as well. Again, that would also maybe be if we didn't see Venom come to full fruition there and it was just more the black suit itself and then maybe Venom moves on and that's the next part. But I really want to understand where we see him become a not so good guy that we need to root against.
Yeah, it definitely will be a interesting way that they have to kind of tightrope this, because you want us to root for him for enough of the film that we actually feel like, oh, this is the hero and we want him to win.
Right.
But then you very rapidly need us to be like, all right, now we know what he's going to be. And I like what they did. I actually think that one way that they did it very successfully, they could have if they had taken it this direction, was the end of, I want to say, Venom 2, where he licks Tom's face on the TV screen. That could have so easily swerved and gone in a different direction, and that could have been Spider-Man 3. I mean, maybe at one point that was on the table, and that's why that end credit was done that way, and they chose to go a different direction. I think, you know what, it worked out. Like, I didn't feel like it was whiplashy at all, so that's fine. But I think that's one way to do it too. Whatever that trigger is, again, whether it's to your point, I see the prey and I want to go after it. I think you're not a good guy. I'm triggered by my mother's experience in the asylum and you're related to a spider and that really unlocks a trauma for him. I don't know. I don't think that we've gotten enough footage to even truly understand the character super well. Like, we understand his motivations. Obviously, we have a basis in the comics, but they're doing enough ad-libbing or like twisting the comic that he's not going to be super comic accurate, which is fine. You're modernizing him. He's been around since like the 60s. I think that's fine. Like, make him exist in a modern world. Otherwise, it would just be very outdated and very like a sore thumb. But because of that, it is harder to pull directly from the comics and say like, oh, this is what they're going to do. So I am really curious, and I hope they can pull it off, because I think that it could be a really successful entry if they do that.
You also have a really good actor at the helm.
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time, so I'm not going to again, put us in that corner, because this is not the first time you've had a very well-known, successful, has done quite a few projects type of actor, especially specifically Aaron Taylor Johnson is very well known in the action movie realm.
Mhm.
Let's not forget he's been in this superhero thing before. He played Pietro in Age of Ultron. I mean, action movie was Bullet Train. I loved him in that. Rip to his character because but he was in that. What am I just Oh, he was in the 2014 Godzilla. Yes, because I believe in the same year they played both siblings and lovers in two different movies, him and Elizabeth Olsen. It was quite the year.
He was in Kick-Ass, which is another comic book adaptation.
Yes, and that's like where he started.
Yeah.
He was in those movies. That is just like his origin essentially in acting. And yes, he's done other things then that are not necessarily action, but he is really one of those actors that I think prefers that genre. He finds himself in it a lot. And so I think, I mean, and he looks great. Like as Kraven, okay, I know. But as Kraven,
Yeah.
I'm saying like he genuinely looks great.
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, I'm sure you definitely could have found a different actor who could have done it just as well, but I don't think I can picture somebody off the top of my head that I would have been like, you would have been a more interesting Craven to me. I don't. So I think bringing him to the table, I think can do a lot. Again, he's an action movie alum. This is what he does the most. So I think physically and to the character of what I've seen, I think he has a lot to bring to the table. Again, it comes down to writing at the end of the day and what that looks like. You can only do so much. Let's be honest. We've seen some really awesome actors try and it didn't go so well. Let's just all take a second for Madam Web.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can't bring somebody like Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney, who are big names, Sydney Sweeney is considered an up and coming star, but now she's kind of reached the she's here moment. But like she's an up and coming star from the past few years. You can't like bring them on and you made a crap movie. Like it's not them. And we said that during that movie.
Well, writing has always been Sony's crutch. It's always been where they have fallen over.
For sure. And so I am hoping maybe they gave a little bit more leeway to the fact you have somebody who has done this crap before. They're not new to the genre. They're not new to this type of thing. Like, I'm sure Dakota Johnson's done action movies. Couldn't name a single one she's been in that's an action movie. Like, I know 50 Shades Grey was not in that way. So
different kind of action, folks.
Not that kind of action. So I do think, maybe that can help as a whole. I like him as Kraven. I'd like to see it wrapped together and it be more. Maybe my tune will change once I see this movie. I don't know. I really don't. But I think they've at least done a really good job with supposedly starting to put a story together from what I see. I like what I'm seeing, but anything's possible when you actually watch a movie that you don't know if the writing's going to be any good.
Yeah, I hope that this ends up going the route of Venom, which is like surprise hit, versus the route of Madam Web, where it's like you have a really good opportunity here to tie your universe together, and instead you wrote something that is complete and utter, like it's like not, you can't follow the film. It makes no sense. You have 3 different plots that all contradict one another, and they're just, I don't even have a word for it. I can't even think of the word of like something that just doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever.
Well, and even just avoiding the fact that if we take it out of what we want coming out of it, Madam Web was a hot mess in itself.
Yeah.
So was Morbius.
Yeah.
They were hot messes, and that is just a fact. I don't even care. I mean, I do a little, but I don't even fully care if you don't wrap this into other things. If you can make a real good movie. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, look at Venom. Venom is not wrapped. I mean, the one that they actually tried to wrap in by the end credits was the one I hated the most.
Yeah.
And that was Let There Be Carnage. I thought that was a crappy movie. I really do. But then the third one, it had things that I had complaints about. I thought it was too long. That was part of it too. There were things that I think should have been cut. But at the end of the day, they didn't wrap it into a whole bigger thing. And I was totally content with it. I left that movie and I really enjoyed it.
Same.
I was like, yeah, you finished a trilogy. You did that. So even if they kind of had me feel how they did about Venom, I'm not going to complain because I'm like, as long as I watched a relatively good movie that I'm not super upset about spending money on, because if y'all could refund me for Madam Web specifically,
yeah,
I could use the like almost $16 plus the like $18 for all my concessions. So you owe me like $40 right now for the waste of my time. on Valentine's Day, mind you. So thank you for that. Regardless, I would like to see this movie do well. I don't know what to predict about it other than it's either going to open doors or it's not. It's either going to disappoint us or it's not. That's really just that's what it comes down to when we do these Sony predictions. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard because with the MCU, and this is something I'm just going to continue harping on, we know that there's a larger universe, so there are options, right? Oh, we could tie into this, or it could lead into this, or we know what the slate looks like, so it could, help set the tone for this, or this, or introduce this character who's then going to be here. There are clues and there are puzzle pieces that it fits into, and it's just a matter of finding the right one to help guide, right? This is supposedly a standalone, but it lives in this larger universe that it may or may not connect to. We have no idea what universe it lives in. It is just completely like it's an island. It is an island in the middle of a very large Sony-sized ocean, and it does not make any sense. And I hope that the film, to your point, is good. If it's a standalone good film, you know what? Fine. Kudos, Sony, you made a good film. That's great. You haven't always done that. So I too would also be thrilled if I am not sad about having spent money on this film. That would actually be a win for me. But a bigger win is you made a good movie and then you were able to make all of these films that we've gone to see over the last few years worth it by making them, I mean, Venom aside, by making them a cohesive lead up to something real. Whether that's Spider Man 4, Spider Man 5, whatever you decide to do, give me a reason why I watched these films because we're now four in? This will be the fourth.
I couldn't tell you.
I know we saw Morbius, Madam Web. What else have we seen? That's not Venom. I guess this is the third. So this is the third one now. Make them mean something. Make all of those experiences in the theater, because especially other than Venom, those other two were not good. Make that mean something. And that to me could be a redeeming opportunity for Sony, because I truly do not know what this film is going to be about in a larger sense, because we have no puzzle pieces to put it with. That's the only one that makes sense.
Yeah, I hope I just enjoy it as a whole. Regardless, I will enjoy Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven.
Yes.
And that is enough for me right now. Believe it or not, we have to talk about end credits. I sort of already gave one of mine, which is my ideal situation. I guess the other one that I would maybe throw out there is some sort of, if they don't have the time in the movie, maybe this would be more of an end credit if they don't wrap up the Rhino kind of bit in like a healthy way. I could see that being an end credit where maybe he held him hostage and was like, hey, because also let's not forget, guys, like, not to harp on this really quick, but just to say, we're not seeing Robot Rhino here. Like, this guy's injecting himself very lizard-like. Like, this is going to be very reminiscent of the lizard.
Yeah.
So, that being said, I don't know if it's a permanent transformation. I don't know how they're going to do it specifically in the movie. Let me say it that way. And so, that being said, I mean, maybe that's going to be he captured him and they're going to have a little moment where they discuss things. I don't know, because I don't see that necessarily maybe having room in a movie of this magnitude of the things he seemingly is going to be doing. So I could see that being something. Otherwise, I mean, I'd be shocked if they set up like a second one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I were to do it, I feel like you had all of the good ones, to be honest. One thing I did want to point out before I do my predictions, because there wasn't a good place to put this before here. Ariana DeBose, her character, Calypso, she is actually one of Craven's love interests in the comics as well, so just keep an eye out for her during the film. I guess if I were to go off the wall, maybe she gets a spin-off. She's a big name, right? So maybe, I don't know how big she is in the comics. I don't really follow Kraven a ton. Like, obviously I follow Spider-Man, but it's really the two of them. So I don't know if like she gets her own spin-off in some, and Sony has been going to some more minor characters. At one point they were going to some wrestler that was tied to Bad Bunny, and that was definitely a
like El Muerto or something like that, right?
El Muerto, I think.
Yeah.
That is definitely a smaller character. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that they set something up for her, because they're like running out of some of the bigger names and they feel the need to keep making these films. I don't know. That's an option. I don't love that option. I just also wanted to put that out there. Also, just again, keep an eye out for her in the film. I think if I were to put my money on two that I actually think are going to happen, I like your Sinister Six idea. I don't think we're going to get all six on the screen in an end credit, but I could see, someone coming in. I don't know whether that's Vulture, if he's acting as the Nick Fury of the Sinister Six, because he was the one who seemingly recruited Morbius. So I don't know if that's it. And then he maybe name drops some of the other guys he's gone to supposedly off screen, to try to recruit as well. Maybe that's how that one works. And then I guess for my second one, I think they would set up a second because, again, supposedly he signed on for multiple movies. So whether that's a Kraven the Hunter or he has some sort of Venom moment where he sees Spider Man and that sets up, his antagonism against Spider Man, maybe that's it. I don't know. It's also tough because we don't know what Spider-Man 4 is at all. They have given us very, very little. So yeah, those are my two. They're not great. I don't love them, but that's it.
I'm actually going to throw one more in the ring because you kind of jostled something when you were like, if they're going to keep just making these movies. So I was thinking, I was going through the plot of the movie of what I know, and he has a brother. We talked about him, right?
Yeah.
That was the
Chameleon.
point. Yeah. I do wonder if maybe that would be something we see because from what I've seen of the movie, and that would be again in the trailers, I don't see him playing a huge part in the bigger overarching story, but he does have comic book precedence. He is a character of his own and has been wrapped into Spider-Man storylines. So I do wonder if that could be, you kind of brought up the second, I brought up making a second. If that's a route they go, maybe his brother indirectly becomes one of his villains or something of that nature. It could be kind of interesting. So I'm going to throw that one out there too, as a just like, if we do go into the second, maybe that's kind of where that goes.
Because isn't that actor, he looks pretty familiar, right? Like he's not some just like new face. I think I've seen him in stuff before. At least I know his face.
Oh, you know why? Because he's just in the new Gladiator. He's across from Joseph Quinn.
Okay.
The other twin, the other emperor. Yes. I was going to say, I was like, he does look familiar, but I can't figure out why. That would be why.
Man, all those Gladiator guys showing up in all this stuff right now. It's kind of crazy.
They were busy, clearly.
Yeah. Well, I think with that, now that we've given our end and mid credit predictions along with a little bit of sort of chat about the film, we're going to wrap on our official Kraven predictions. Make sure that you're catching us as we watch the film and react in future episodes. You can do that by following the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. You can also check out the website, which is linked below. It's a great hub, has our calendar, all of that. So if you're ever looking for anything upcoming, trying to figure out what we're going to be covering in the future, you can check that out as well. Last but not least, if you would be inclined to potentially support the show, you can do that via our Buy Me a Coffee, which is also linked in the show notes.
You guys can also follow us on any of our socials that are linked below in the show notes. So go ahead and give us a follow, including on our YouTube and our new TikTok account. Just search us at Sisters Assembled and you'll be able to find us. And next week, we're obviously reacting to Kraven because what comes next? So make sure you guys are going out and getting your tickets, going and watching the movie. Hopefully it's good. I'm personally excited for it as a whole. We'll see what happens, but make sure you guys go and watch it, go support it. And we will see you next week on the other side of Kraven the Hunter. So until then, Marvel just blew your mind / Sony. So let's talk about it.